Oh, what's good? It's Andrew from ProducerSociety.com. Today I'm going to explore the second part of the channel EQ automation tutorial. So before I touched on the EQ automation using the example of peak 1 in terms of the automation menu. So now I'm just going to talk about a few more things, including the other peaks, as well as some other useful tips to consider, as well as the presets like the low cut and the high cut, the low shelf, the high shelf, etc. So as I just said, we're going to explore each one of these right now. So I didn't touch on this before, but I'm going to touch on it now. So essentially, as I showed you before, right? You got your let's bring this up right now in your controls. So you got your automation menu, right? You got your automation menu. Here's the first channel EQ. So the peak 1, the peaks correspond to the 4 main bands in the middle. So as you can see here, you got peak 1, peak 2, peak 3, and peak 4. So this is peak 1, this is peak 2, this is peak 3, and this is peak 4. So you can kind of see I illustrated it with this right here. So this is peak 1, peak 2, peak 3, and peak 4, just so you have a better idea of what's going on. So that's essentially what those parameters in the channel EQ automation plugin are doing. They're controlling those 4 main bands out of the 8 total bands. So that's an important thing to note, because that's obviously going to be very useful for you when you're trying to automate things. But anyway, so we're also going to touch on some other things today. So you got your first channel EQ, right? So this is the channel EQ where my main EQ is on the main lead vocal. So if I wanted to automate EQ, what I would actually do is I would bring up a second EQ plugin, EQ channel EQ. So now we got another EQ plugin right here. Now, so if you wanted to automate it now, and just as an aside note, when you set up these plugins in the automation menu, the automation corresponds to the plugins that are set up in the smart controls. So as you can see, the same 6 are the same 6 in the smart controls. So if you want to set up the automation on the second channel EQ, then it's easily seen right here, right? So that's how we're going to adjust that. However, when you click on this EQ, it's actually going to show you the first channel EQ plugin in the smart controls. Now, if you wanted to change that, what you would do is you just switch them, and then the EQ, it'll actually show you the first channel EQ plugin. The analyzer will show you the first one. So that's how you get that to change. However, that's going to change the sound as well, so you don't want to do that. So I would say the best way to do it is actually just to click on it, and then you can see what's going on when you're automating the channel EQ. So there's the first one, and then this is the second one. And then now the EQ shows the first one in the smart controls, which is what we want. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you the EQ right now, or the second EQ plugin. We're just going to kind of demonstrate what's going on here. So we got the peak 1 frequency, right? I'm going to turn that one up, put it about halfway. Then we're going to go peak 2 or peak 1 gain on the second plugin. And then we're going to go peak 3 Q factor. We're going to put that right here as well. And then we're going to go peak on and off, peak 1 on and off. So there we go. Now we're going to click on this, and we should see some changes very shortly. So here's the channel EQ peak 1 frequency. Let's go like that. Channel EQ peak 1 gain, and we're going to go like that. So there we go. So as I said, this is peak 1, right? So what this is doing, it's controlling this first band right here. It's controlling this one. So if I set up another one, which I'm going to do right now, let's go channel EQ2, the second plugin, and peak 2 frequency. We're going to set that right here. Peak 2 frequency, peak 2 gain. We're going to set that right here. Peak 2 Q factor. We're going to do that. There, we just made it more narrow. And then, we'll do the on and off switch one just for fun. So there you go. Now that's controlling the second band. So now you're going to go into peak 3 frequency, peak 3 gain. There, and then we're going to control the Q of it as well, just so we can differentiate between what's going on here. So there we go. So that's peak 3. That's peak 3. So this is peak 1, peak 2, peak 3. So that's what's going on. Now, when you set up peak 4, it's going to adjust this one. So I hope you kind of see what I'm trying to show you right now. Anyway, so we're actually going to get rid of all this stuff now, and I'm going to show you the other cool thing about the EQ plugin as well as the automation. So here, you can see you got your peak 1, peak 2, peak 3, peak 4, which controls the 4 main bands in the center of the channel EQ plugin, right? Well, these 4 on the outside, you'll notice the shape is different. And what that's indicating is actually what it's meant for. So this is the low cut, this is the low shelf, this is the high shelf, and this is the high cut. Okay? So when you go into your EQ automation, you can see these right here, right? So you got your high cut frequency. So let's turn that on right now. We got the high cut frequency. High cut frequency, high cut on and off. We're going to turn that on. Boom. So now it's controlling this one on the far right hand corner. That's what it's doing, right? It's controlling the far right corner. It's this one right here. So if I was to set up a high shelf instead, it would control this one. So I'm going to show you that right now. So we're going to go to channel EQ 2. We're going to go high shelf frequency, high shelf gain. There we go. So now we're adjusting this one instead. Rather than this one, we're adjusting this one. So let's go like that. And you can see how it's corresponding to it, right? So that's what's going on there. Like these 4 on the outside, they're meant for the low cut, the low and high cut in shelves. And that's precisely what we're doing. That's how this whole channel EQ thing works. That's how the automation works, and that's why the parameters are set up like that in the automation menu. So that's essentially what's going on here. So I hope you learned something from this. I've never seen anybody dive into this plugin in that way before, so I'm hoping that this is helpful to a lot of the people watching as well as all the people reading. But yeah, make sure you check out my article as well, because I really dive into this stuff, and there's all kinds of helpful illustrations and so on and so forth. And that's pretty much it, man. Like, make sure you like and subscribe if you like the video. It should be helpful to you. I'm just trying to think of something else that maybe I should say about this. But I think that's about it, man. I think I touched on everything I wanted to touch on. But anyway, that's how the automation of the EQ works in GarageBand. As I just said, like and subscribe, and then I'll see you guys in the next video. All right? Peace.